Tonight, before you go to sleep, try something. Turn off every light in your house, not just the big ones. Every light. The lamp beside your bed, the light in the hallway, the tiny glow from your kitchen, everything. Then stand completely still. For a moment, nothing feels different. You're safe. You're indoors. You know exactly where you are. But wait a little longer. Listen. A creak in the floorboards, a distant sound outside, the shape of a chair that suddenly doesn't look quite like a chair anymore. And something strange begins to happen. Your imagination wakes up. The darkness starts filling itself with possibilities, not because anything is actually there, but because your brain has spent millions of years preparing for the possibility that something might be. Most people think fear of the dark is childish, something you're supposed to outgrow. But for almost all of human history, being afraid of the night wasn't a weakness. It was a survival instinct. Because 100,000 years ago, when the sun disappeared below the horizon, the world changed. The familiar landscape vanished. The edge of the forest became invisible. Every shadow became a hiding place. And unlike you, your ancestors couldn't flip a switch and flood the darkness with light. Once night arrived, they were no longer the smartest creatures on Earth. They were simply another animal trying to survive until sunrise. And out there in the darkness, something was waiting. Something that could see better, hear better, smell better, and kill faster. The night wasn't empty. It belonged to predators. And for hundreds of thousands of years, that simple fact shaped the human mind in ways that are still with you today. The question is, if ancient humans feared the night so deeply, what exactly were they afraid of? And why does a small part of your brain still fear it now? For ancient humans, the night wasn't frightening because of imagination. It was frightening because it was real. When the sun went down 100,000 years ago, humans lost almost every advantage they had. Our eyes are designed for daylight. Compared to many predators, our night vision is terrible. A cave lion could see movement in darkness long before a human noticed anything was there. Hyenas could hear sounds from remarkable distances. Leopards could move through the shadows almost silently. Humans, meanwhile, were nearly blind, and the predators surrounding them were not small. Cave lions were larger than modern African lions. Packs of hyenas patrolled the landscape after sunset. Leopards lurked in trees above trails and watering holes. Even a single mistake could be fatal. Archaeologists have found evidence that early humans were often prey, not hunters. One of the most famous examples is the Taung child, discovered in South Africa in 1924. The skull belonged to a young human ancestor whose eye sockets contained puncture marks matching the talons of a large eagle. The child had not died naturally. It had been hunted. For millions of years, this was normal. Humans were not the rulers of the food chain. They were simply another source of meat. And darkness made everything worse. Because for your ancestors, assuming the worst was often the difference between seeing another sunrise and never seeing one again. But if the story ended there, humans wouldn't be here. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors faced a problem no other animal had ever solved. They weren't fast enough to escape the night, and they weren't strong enough to fight what lived inside it. So they did something extraordinary. They changed the rules. The weapon that gave humans a chance wasn't sharper teeth or stronger muscles. It was fire. Today, a campfire feels comforting. Ancient humans saw something much more powerful. They saw protection. Predators feared fire. Even modern lions and hyenas hesitate when confronted by flames. To an animal, fire is unpredictable. It moves, crackles, spits sparks, and burns anything that gets too close. A small fire created a circle of safety in a world that had very little of it. For the first time, humans could push the darkness back. Not completely, but enough. Instead of hiding silently until morning, families could gather around a fire. They could stay awake after sunset. They could watch the surrounding landscape. They could warn each other when danger approached. And something else happened. The firelight extended the day. After hunting, gathering, and surviving, people suddenly had extra hours together. Hours to talk, hours to teach, hours to pass knowledge from one generation to the next. A child could learn which sounds meant danger. A hunter could explain where lions like to hide. An elder could tell stories about mistakes that should never be repeated. In a strange way, fire did more than keep predators away. It gave humans time to become human. But even fire had limits. The flames could only reach so far. Beyond that circle of light, the darkness was still waiting. And over time, ancient humans began to realize that the creatures outside the fire weren't the only things they feared. There was something else hiding in the night, something their own minds were creating. The strange thing is that ancient humans weren't only afraid of what was actually out there, they were also afraid of what might be out there. And from an evolutionary perspective, that made perfect sense. Imagine you're sitting beside a fire 50,000 years ago. Somewhere beyond the light, you hear a rustle in the darkness. Maybe it's a lion. Maybe it's the wind. The problem is that you don't know. Now imagine two different people. The first hears the sound and assumes it's nothing. The second hears the same sound and immediately assumes danger. Which one survives longer? For most of human history, the cautious person had the advantage. If you mistake the wind for a lion, you feel embarrassed for a few minutes. If you mistake a lion for the wind, you die. Over thousands of generations, natural selection favored brains that were extremely sensitive to potential threats. Human minds became pattern-detecting machines, constantly searching for hidden dangers. This is why people see faces in shadows, why a coat hanging in a dark room suddenly looks like a person, why a strange sound at night instantly grabs your attention. Your brain would rather create a false alarm than miss a real threat. Psychologists sometimes call this a hyperactive agency detection system, the tendency to assume that something is causing an event, even when there may be nothing there at all. For ancient humans, this mental shortcut was often life-saving, but it also had an unexpected consequence. The more humans stared into the darkness, the more they began to imagine things hiding inside it. At some point, ancient humans began fearing something that couldn't bite them, at least not physically. Long before there were written religions, long before temples, priests, or holy books, humans were already trying to explain the things they couldn't see. Imagine sitting beside a fire at night. The flames flicker. Shadows move across the ground. The wind suddenly howls through the trees. Somewhere in the darkness, a branch snaps. You know predators exist. You know danger is real. But not every sound has an obvious source. Not every shadow can be explained. And the human brain hates unanswered questions. When our ancestors couldn't identify what caused something, they often filled the gap with imagination. A strange noise became a spirit. A shadow became a presence. A dream about a dead relative became evidence that some part of them still existed. Anthropologists believe many of humanity's earliest supernatural beliefs may have emerged from this tendency. Humans naturally search for agency, the idea that someone or something is responsible for what happens around them. If the grass moves, something moved it. If a voice appears in a dream, someone must be speaking. If misfortune strikes, perhaps an unseen force caused it. The darkness became the perfect home for these ideas because darkness hides information. And when information disappears, imagination rushes in to fill the empty space. Over thousands of years, the night became more than a dangerous time of day. It became a world of spirits, ancestors, monsters, and unseen beings. But the most remarkable part is that even after humans learned to fear what they imagined, they never stopped fearing what was real. Today, most people don't have to worry about cave lions. There are no hyenas waiting outside your bedroom, no leopards hiding beyond the streetlights, no predators stalking the edge of your campfire. And yet, many adults still feel uneasy in complete darkness. That's because the world changed far faster than the human brain did. Electric lights have existed for little more than a century. Cities bright enough to erase the night are even newer. But the instincts that shaped human survival were forged over hundreds of thousands of years. Evolution works slowly, very slowly. The people who survived long enough to become your ancestors were often the ones who treated darkness with caution. They paid attention to strange sounds. They stayed close to the fire. They avoided wandering alone at night. Those instincts were passed down generation after generation, and traces of them still remain. This is why a dark forest feels different from a sunny one, Why a sudden noise at night seems louder than the same noise during the day. Why many people can walk through an empty building comfortably at noon, but feel nervous doing the exact same thing after midnight. Logically, you know you're safe. But another part of your brain is operating on much older information. A part that evolved in a world where darkness concealed predators, accidents, and uncertainty. The modern world may have conquered the night with electricity, but deep inside, your brain still remembers a time when darkness was one of the most dangerous places a human could be. When people talk about fear, they usually describe it as a weakness, something irrational, something to overcome. But for ancient humans, fear of the dark wasn't a flaw in the system, it was the system. The individuals who ignored danger didn't become heroes. Most of them became food. The ones who survived were often the cautious ones. The people who stayed close to the fire. The people who listened when something moved in the darkness. The people who chose safety over curiosity when the cost of being wrong was death. For hundreds of thousands of years, fear acted like an invisible shield. It kept children from wandering away from camp. It kept hunters from taking unnecessary risks after sunset. It kept families together during the most dangerous hours of the day. In a strange way, fear helped build human civilization, because every person who survived the night had another chance to learn, to teach, and to pass knowledge to the next generation. Without that fear, many of those generations might never have existed at all. The darkness itself was never humanity's enemy. Darkness was simply a test that rewarded caution and punished carelessness. And over countless generations, those lessons became woven into the human mind. Which means that when your heart beats a little faster in the dark, you aren't experiencing a malfunction. You're experiencing an ancient survival instinct that helped your ancestors stay alive long enough to become your ancestors. And that may be why, even in a world flooded with artificial light, a small part of us still respects the night. For most of human history, night belonged to something else. Predators hunted, humans waited. Today, millions of people live under so much artificial light that they rarely see a truly dark night at all. For hundreds of thousands of years, every sunset carried the same question. Would you still be alive by morning? Your ancestors didn't know. They couldn't lock a door. They couldn't turn on a light. They couldn't call for help. Today, we live in a world illuminated by electricity. We fill the darkness with streetlights, screens, and cities that never truly sleep. We have pushed the night farther away than any human before us could have imagined.